Hello everybody, my name is Brady and we are back with another React video, and today we're going to be checking out another one of Mr. Beat's American presidential election videos with the election of 1852. So, what is there to say about the election of 1852? So we had Zachary Taylor. He dies. Some people think he was assassinated. That doesn't seem to be the case. It would be way more fun to talk about if he was, but that doesn't seem to be how it went. So we have Zachary Taylor dies of non-assassination related causes. Then we get Millard Fillmore, who is one of the least well-known presidents in American history. And here we're going to get Franklin Pierce, probably one of the only people less well-known than Millard Fillmore. Am I selling the importance of this election to you well enough here? We got one really not popular guy being exchanged for another probably even less well-known guy. I tell you that the drama was in the Congress, guys. The presidents we get during this time, though you get people like James K. Polk, who made a huge difference because he had a whole war and a lot of territory to deal with, that sort of stuff. A lot of the people at the top, they weren't the most exciting. They may have been good or bad or whatever. They were not always exciting. And that's kind of what we're getting a little bit of during this time. We have a lot of really cool people on the scene, though. We're setting up for the Civil War. A lot of the big figures were going to be a big deal during the Civil War. A lot of them are on the scene, but we're not quite there yet. So I don't know what we're going to be talking about in this one. Third parties, I guess. We got the know-nothings. I like those guys. I mean, I don't like them, but they're fun to learn about. So, and they're a party called the Know-Nothings. How does that even happen? All right, let's get this started.
Mr. Beat presents Presidential Elections in American History. The 17th presidential election in American history took place on November 2nd, 1852. You might call this election the election of 1844 Part 2 because it was very similar to it. Just like in 1844, a young dark horse candidate won. Also like in 1844, the incumbent president was a Whig who had become president after the death of his war hero predecessor. And that Whig didn't get his party's nomination for the next election. In 1852, that Whig was Millard Fillmore, who took...
You can kind of compare the elections there, but you also can't compare Franklin Pierce to James K. Polk. They are miles apart in their effectiveness as leaders. I couldn't tell you 5 things about Franklin Pierce. I don't know if it's because I don't know 5 things about him or if there just aren't 5 things about Franklin Pierce. Sometimes it's hard to tell. One thing I do know is that he was depressed because his son died in like a train accident or something, and that's like the big story. If you hear a story about Franklin Pierce, it's pretty good chance that you're hearing that story. That is like one of the big stories. Being depressed in office, it probably wasn't very good. It probably didn't make for the most effective leader, but I don't know. Lincoln was depressed, so I don't know if I can take that away from him.
Took over after Zachary Taylor died in 1850. The biggest national issue during Taylor and Fillmore's presidencies was the expansion of slavery out in Western territories. The Compromise of 1850, had helped ease tensions a bit, but it really just kicked the can down the road. The country was becoming further divided between Northerners and Southerners over slavery.
Another issue is the Fugitive Slave Acts, which are what if a slave escapes from a slave state and runs to a free state, the Fugitive Slave Acts say that the people in that free state are obligated to return the slave to slavery back in the slave state. And a lot of northern states were not respecting those laws. I guess nobody wants to have to take care of somebody else's property when they run away. Like, it is putting a burden on another group, but there's also groups that are smuggling slaves out who otherwise would be compelled to return them. They probably don't want to. If they're going through all that trouble to get them out of there. We have like the Underground Railroad. They are firmly active.
You know what else was divided? The Whig Party. They had a hard time deciding who their nominee for the 1852 election would be. Many favored Fillmore, but many others favored Mexican-American war hero Winfield Scott, Old Fuss and Feathers himself.
That makes sense, because the Whigs, they're kind of like, this is kind of like the equivalent of running a celebrity. War heroes. They ran Zachary Taylor, who was the war hero. What do? He dies? Get the next war hero. See if this works twice. Winfield Scott. He was the next guy in line when that came along.
Even others favored Secretary of State Daniel Webster. In the end, it was Old Fuss and Feathers, Winfield Scott, who would get the nomination. William Alexander Graham, the Secretary of the Navy and former governor and senator from North Carolina, would be his running mate. The Democratic Party had at least 9 candidates who were all fighting to get nominated. At their convention, 4 major candidates stood out. Lewis Cass, who won the nomination in 1848, James Buchanan, the former Secretary of State and senator from Pennsylvania, Stephen Douglas, a senator from Illinois, and William L. Marcy, the former Secretary of War.
So we got some people who are a big deal, like we have James Buchanan. He's going to be president right before Abraham Lincoln. He's considered the worst president in American history by a lot of people. And I don't think that they're wrong. Maybe there's somebody I would put below him, but I don't know. He might... It's hard to put anybody below him because the Civil War kind of kicked off on his watch. Then we have Stephen Douglas, and if you don't know who he is famous mostly for his debates with Abraham Lincoln. Like, yeah, he was a very popular dude during the time, but one of the big claims to fame are his big series of debates with Abraham Lincoln. A lot of Lincoln's most questionable quotes, a lot of his more racist quotes that people dredge up against him, a lot of those occurred during the Douglas debates. And they're a great way of seeing how people talked about the issue of slavery at the time. So if you're interested in that stuff, I think it's really cool. I have them downloaded on Audible. They had like these 2 voice actors recreate the debate, and I thought that was really cool. It's one of my favorite things that I have in my audiobook collection.
And seemingly out of nowhere comes another dark horse candidate for the Democrats, Franklin Pierce, a 48-year-old former senator and representative from New Hampshire. They ended up nominating Pierce with William R. King, a senator from Alabama, as his running mate. Third parties? Oh, there were plenty. The biggest was the Free Soil Party, which had a strong showing in 1848. They nominated this time John P. Hale, another senator from New Hampshire, with George Washington Julian as his running mate, a U.S. representative from Indiana who was later a radical Republican before it was cool. The Union Party formed after many Whigs were upset with Winfield Scott's nomination. They nominated Daniel Webster for president.
So Daniel Webster was the greatest talker of the period. From what everybody says, nobody could give a speech like Daniel Webster, so he had that going for him. He was a little bit of a shill for the banks, though. Big on financial institutions. People generally don't trust that. He might be able to, with the support of a strong party, not the party that nominates him, like if he got one of the main parties to nominate him, he would probably have the Northeast on lock, but I don't know what sort of broad appeal he would have had. He was definitely worth more in the Congress. And he's going to die pretty soon anyway. I mean, they didn't know that, but he's going to die pretty soon anyway.
Then there was the Native American Party. No, not that Native American, that Native American Party. They were also known as the Know Nothing Party by opponents who thought that they, well, knew nothing. Surprisingly, the party embraced the nickname because I guess they liked being called stupid.
Well, there's another story behind the name for the Know Nothing Party, that they were very secretive, and when people asked them about, like, what was going, like, when they would leave meetings, people would be like, what did they talk about in there? They'd be like, I know nothing, and they would be, like, super secretive about that. I don't think that's a very good marketing tactic for your party, that, like, you don't tell people what you believe, but that is one of the big stories behind the name. They would be like, I don't know anything, I don't know. we don't believe things. But they were very much an anti-immigration, xenophobic, anti-Catholic, anti-Irish. They generally didn't like people who came to the country after they were born. If you weren't here at this arbitrary time, you're no good. And if you're Catholic or Irish or from one of those European countries where they like popes, no good. And that's what they were all about. They were a weird party.
Also nominated Daniel Webster, even though Webster didn't approve. And then there was the Southern Rights Party, an offshoot of the Democratic Party that nominated George Troup, a former senator, representative, and governor of Georgia. This was the first election in which citizens of the new state of California could vote. The two biggest political parties, the Whigs and the Democrats, had similar platforms, so the campaigns were mostly just about the personalities of Pierce and Scott. This jaded a lot of voters and explains why so many third parties popped up. The lack of clear-cut issues caused the voter turnout to decline. And here are the results.
Even the people at the time didn't care about these guys. That is what it is. Like, actually, a lot of really interesting people are there. We have Winfield Scott. He's very interesting. We have Daniel Webster. He's very interesting. It's just the guy who happened to win, for some reason, was not interesting at all. I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know what it was.
Franklin Pierce won in a landslide, becoming the 14th president of the United States. Oh, Pierce kicked butt, all right. He received 254 electoral votes, and Winfield Scott only received 42. Pierce received 50.8% of the popular vote, and Scott received just 43.9%. John?
Yeah, I assume this is because they were just bored of having a Whig president, decided they wanted to shift towards the other party. If people are, like, ruffled by the status quo, then you don't go with the status quo party. So that probably worked against Winfield Scott. Maybe, I don't know, maybe the Democrats could have nominated anybody and won at that point. Maybe people were just done, and they are going to be done with the Whig party, but maybe they were just done having a Whig president for that time. I'm not sure exactly what was so appealing about Franklin Pierce. Maybe I'm ignorant.
John P. Hale came in third with 4.9% of the popular vote. All other candidates received much less than 1% of the popular vote. Daniel Webster, the Union Party and unofficial Native American Party candidate, died 1 week before the election. Despite this, he got 7,000 votes and finished fourth place. The fact that this many people voted for him, even though he was dead, sort of proves how disappointed voters were with the two biggest candidates. William R. King became the 13th vice president in American history. However, he died 6 weeks after taking office, serving the shortest tenure in history for someone who didn't become president.
I don't know too much about William R. King. I did finish a book on him and James Buchanan. I think it's called Bosom Friends, but that was more about like boarding house culture and politics than it was about their political careers. It was more about the process, because they were both bachelors. That was the one thing, and there's a lot of rumors that they may have had a relationship. I don't see anything solid to confirm that, but I also can't say that they didn't have like a relationship or whatever. But that was a thing. But the thing is, like, these are two unmarried guys who lived together at one point. I don't know. It's an interesting conversation, but the book was all right.
Babyface Pierce became the youngest president in American history up to that point. Tragedy seemed to follow this guy around a lot. Before he was even sworn into office, he was in a train accident which killed his only surviving son. This cast a great shadow on his presidency, which most historians say did not go well. Scott losing the election of 1852 was devastating for the Whigs, and the election was the last one in which they even ran a candidate. Following the election, the party began to collapse.
So the Whig Party is going to fall into pieces, and a lot of Whigs are going to join the Republican Party when it forms. The Republican Party, though, is, in its early years, unfocused. They have this abolitionist wing to it. They have these Whigs. They have these know-nothings. They have all these little third-party entities that are coming to form this one thing. So their general stance on things was unfocused because they were an amalgamation of all sorts of different things. They were this hydra of political beliefs. They would focus up eventually, but yeah, that's one of the big things one of the big challenges of the early Republican Party.
I'll see you for the next election, buddy.
Oh, that one's gonna be fun. All right, so thank you guys for watching. That was fun. That was more fun than I thought it would be because of the little third-party shenanigans. It made it a little bit more fun. I was skeptical because we have some generally uninteresting people, but there are interesting people who are on the scene. Those people just don't get to be president during this time. You don't get to be president if you are a whole ton of fun. What a shame. So I'm going to be doing more of these in the future, but like as we get further and further, I'm going to know less and less about the candidates involved because my focus tends to go up to the Civil War. Once we get to it, we'll see. We'll see how much I can actually contribute as far as conversation goes. I've been doing these kind of slowly, so who knows even when I'll get around to that stuff. I've still got another election separating us from some real hardcore Civil War conflict, but we'll see how that goes. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you tomorrow with another video. All right, bye.